Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Now I'm gonna be honest, if you're a young man watching this, chances are that the modern world has destroyed you, and you might not even know it. We are subjected to things more detrimental to our mental and physical health on a more constant basis than any other generation of people in human history. Think about the vices of generations past. There was obviously alcohol, which, before the 60s, they consumed at a lesser rate than we do. A few rare people on the outskirts of society consumed pornography, sure. Compare these times with what our generation has pushed on us on a constant basis. Social media, the rise in use of which has been correlated to rising rates of depression and suicidal ideation, is pushed on younger generations like church attendance was pushed on older ones, and is even more pervasive. Pornography usage has skyrocketed and is seen almost exclusively as a moral virtue or as an enjoyable pastime. Drug usage is often glorified and pushed. What is possibly worst is that the majority of young men don't see any of these as detrimental. In olden days, deviancy and degeneracy were condemned, a fantasy in today's tolerant society, so they were rare. I'd hope to be able to use this video as an abridged guide on how to avoid these vices, why you should, and in some cases, alternatives to them. Polyester was created in the mid-20th century and began being circulated in the clothing industry at around the same time. Polyester was seen as somewhat of a miracle material. It was comfortable, water-resistant, recyclable, and could be made to resemble any material imaginable, from silk to cotton to spandex. It was completely synthetic, so no animals were involved in its making, which made its production far easier than any other fabric. This ease, by the way, is why so many polyester-based textiles come from unsophisticated factories in China and Indonesia. It and other plastic-based fabrics like rayon could be fashioned into any type of clothing, and interweaving them with other fabrics made this clothing nearly indistinguishable from that of the past. By far the most important aspect of polyester, however, was its cost. At the time, polyester was significantly cheaper to produce than any other fabric. These factors made polyester explode onto the market to the point where today it is nearly ubiquitous. It would be a hard task to find an average consumer with little or no polyester in their wardrobe. Just take a look at yours, you might be surprised. But it seems that the mass adoption of polyester into society has come at a great cost, for as a result of the speed of its adoption, the fabric was not closely scrutinized. Polyester's synthetic nature, which makes it non-biodegradable already a serious problem, makes it extremely, but subtly, toxic to humans. It is important to keep in mind that polyester would not be the first material of this nature. Remember that asbestos was used in homes since the late 19th century until it was banned. Lead piping was used in the country before we declared independence from the Crown, until it was banned hundreds of years later. Both of these were seen as harmless for some time, and both were banned because new research revealed that they were extremely, if subtly, toxic to humans. The concept of harmful microplastics has become so widespread that a couple of months ago it was a meme. Everybody knows that microscopic pieces of plastic are getting into our bodies and causing untold amounts of potentially irreversible damage, like inflammation, disruption of our endocrine systems, and potentially even damage to our brains. A lot of people even know that one of the main ways that microplastics get into our bodies is through drinking out of plastic water bottles, which is another thing that you should avoid, by the way. But seemingly very few people recognize that one of the biggest ways that microplastics are absorbed into the body is through the wearing of synthetic fibers, such as rayon, spandex, or polyester. The use of synthetic when referring to these materials is somewhat misleading. A more specific description would be that they are literally made out of plastic. When coming into contact with skin, the plastics that polyester is made out of essentially rub off in the form of microplastics and enter into our bodies through our pores. When wearing a shirt made completely out of this material, like so many people do every day, this process of plastics being rubbed into our skin happens across one's entire torso for however long one is wearing it. What's worse is that many men wear boxers or briefs that are made out of polyester, and the wearing of these garments has been linked with infertility and hormone disruption. All of this would be bad enough if not for polyester's extremely negative effect on the environment. Since this material is not biodegradable, when it enters a landfill, it often leaches into the nearby water supply, causing microplastic to enter that too. All of this is to say that you need to avoid wearing polyester. There is a very good chance that one day soon it will be banned, and in the future it will be looked back on like lead piping or asbestos, but until that day comes, the only one who can save you is yourself. Try your best to exclusively wear organic fibers like linen, wool, or cotton. This one is pretty obvious, and in a lot of places it is already socially detestable, so I'll keep this section brief. If you vape, you're actually retarded. Smoking tobacco is somewhat understandable. Doing so provides a testosterone boost. It's a plant that is grown. It looks extremely cool, and naturally doing it in heavy moderation isn't actually that bad for you. Don't get me wrong, if you're watching this anywhere in the Western world, you should not smoke ever, since Western cigarettes are stocked full of carcinogens that do horrific things to your body, and they are addictive. Vaping, however, is the idiot's tobacco. It still has the carcinogens, it's still very addictive, but it has literally none of the benefits. It looks like you're sucking on a USB stick, it probably gives you a testosterone deficit, it's made from God knows what. The only benefit that it has over tobacco is all of the fun flavors like blue raspberry or cotton candy. If you vape because you want to quit cigarettes, that's alright, but if you're watching this video, you know that's not what the hell you're doing. It's been statistically proven that the majority of people who vape did not smoke prior to them vaping. People who vape are total losers too. Look at the average vapor versus the average tobacco smoker. Again, not endorsing tobacco. All this is to say that if I see you vaping in public, I'm going to come over there and kick your ass. Screens are pretty much universal in modern society. You should know this since you're watching this video on one. It is actually impossible for the vast majority of this country to go one full day without seeing a screen. All these screens emit some form of blue light, which has different properties than other kinds of light. You have to try to stay away from this blue light for two major reasons. The first and most often repeated is that blue light seriously messes up your sleep cycle. Getting good sleep is wildly underrated in modern society. It seems like only the most health-conscious people there are really know about the benefits of good sleep and the unbelievable detriments of bad sleep. Not getting enough quality sleep consistently can lead to memory problems, brain fog, depression, heart disease, and can make you more likely to injure yourself accidentally. It's hard for most people to see how badly their sleep quality is messing up their life, because most people hardly ever get any good sleep. What is worse is that a lot of people might think that they're getting good sleep because they're going to bed 8 hours before they wake up, but this really is not enough. The two biggest ways to improve your sleep quality are to go to bed at the exact same time every night, and of course, to drastically limit your exposure to blue light before you go to bed. Blue light from our screens and sunlight are pretty much indistinguishable to our eyes, which is a problem because our eyes, and by extension our brain, view sunlight very importantly. We have evolved to be woken up by the sun and to go to sleep at night. This is why the natural production of sleep chemicals in our body only begins when it is dark, which is why blue light is so bad for our sleep. When you look at your phone screen late at night, your subconscious basically thinks that it is daytime, so your brain does not begin producing melatonin, the chemical that makes you tired. This leads to it being much harder to fall asleep, and by extension leads to you getting significantly worse sleep. So if anything, it is incredibly important to stop staring at blue light at night. And by the way, if you're watching this right before you go to bed, just shut the video off, it won't hurt my feelings. But I would posit that it is also a good idea to stop looking at blue light in a more general sense. If you're an average person, and you probably are, you probably spend an ungodly amount of time looking at screens. There are only a couple of things that you can do on these devices that are actually beneficial to you. Doing work, learning, maybe playing chess. But the unquestionably vast majority of people do not exclusively use these devices for these reasons. Most people, especially young people, waste tens of hours every week on these devices. It is so important that you stop doing this. We only have a limited amount of free time in our lives, and if you're young, you have been gifted with an extremely large amount of it. To spend it on things like endlessly scrolling social media or YouTube, the majority of which you won't even remember doing, is the biggest disservice that you could do to yourself. So try your best to make the only time you spend with blue light time spent on those aforementioned beneficial things, although perhaps an even better route would be to cut it out of your life to the largest extent that you possibly can. Yeah, this one seems kind of obvious and still so many people disregard it. The idea of not doing things that feel good in the short term but will hurt you in the long term is pretty much easily understandable. Everybody knows that junk food is bad for you, for instance, because eating it sacrifices your long-term health for short-term pleasure and gratification. Drugs are the epitome of this. Most people know how and why drugs are bad for you. We've all heard horrible stories surrounding fentanyl or opioids. We've all seen Breaking Bad and meth heads and homeless people tweaking. It's all very disturbing, and I think that society has generally done a pretty alright job in portraying drugs as terribly as they really are. There is one drug, however, that society has not done a good job in portraying as bad, and that is weed. Weed's danger actually comes from its relative harmlessness. Much of it is grown organically, making it much better for you than more synthetic drugs, and overdosing on it is very difficult. These facts have made it socially acceptable for it to be legalized in the majority of states, and have made people generally more lax regarding their opinions on it, at least more so than they were in the past. While weed is not overtly dangerous, however, it is very bad for you. The long and short is that weed makes you essentially content with wasting your life. A very good way that I've heard it described is that weed makes you happy when you shouldn't be. Its use is said to make people very relaxed, often to the point of laziness. This makes it the perfect companion to playing video games, which is why stoner culture focuses so heavily on them. If you are a young man, you should constantly be striving to do good and productive things. It is so important to be reading, to be trying to start a business, to be working out. The effects of weed not only make it hard to do these things, but make it hard to want to do these things, which is arguably more important. Only a generation as lazy and unmotivated as ours would even think to propagate such a drug on such a mass scale. If you are content with completely wasting your potential and giving in to the allures of pleasure that the modern world can provide, weed will probably aid you in your goal. But if you want to make something of yourself, which you absolutely should, stop smoking it. So basically, just don't do drugs, coke, weed, whatever. Drink alcohol instead. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that either. I'm going to keep this one brief relative to its importance, seeing as I'm bound to make a full video on it eventually. But before I begin, if you watch porn, you're probably going to have an extremely strong emotional reaction to what I'm about to tell you. Your brain is probably going to try to come up with every possible reason as to why I'm wrong. Please, for 1 second, just assume that what I am saying could possibly be true. Pornography is the single most pervasive vice that exists today. About 80% of the male population report that they consume it. The average age that people start watching it is age 12. This is a Google image result of what a 12-year-old looks like. Now, I could tell you about all of the terrible things that watching porn regularly, or at least once every couple of days, does to the brain. I could tell you about how it spikes your dopamine to the point of raising your dopamine threshold, making it harder and harder to actually become happy and content without watching porn. I could tell you about how, if you're young, it completely strips away your innocence. I could tell you about how it causes intense brain fog, making it extremely hard to do anything other than pursue meaningless pleasure, getting one stuck in a loop of unproductivity that can last years. I could tell you about how it gives you a testosterone deficit and makes you more feminine. I could tell you about how it causes sexual perversion, about how it causes erectile dysfunction, about its links with depression. But I really do think that my description of that would pale in comparison to you actually quitting, or at least taking a break from pornography, and trying to be mindful and cognizant of how it affects your brain when you do. I began watching it when I was in early middle school, and I watched it for years afterward. I quit and restarted watching it many times, and every single time that I quit for more than a week, I remember acutely feeling the benefits of doing so. I remember always feeling like I was back in control, like I had my life back. I am confident in saying that throughout all of the years that I was addicted to it, pornography was always the single worst thing that I was doing, for all aspects of my life. It was horrible for my brain, for my mental health, for my personal relationships. Get off of it, now. I have no reason whatsoever to deceive you, and plenty of very smart people agree with me that if you quit for at least a week, you will see the benefits. I cannot stress this enough. It would be better for your health to quit porn than to quit any other thing on this list. If you're still not convinced, watch the video in the top right for a significantly more detailed breakdown of why this thing is so bad for you. So in conclusion, stop wearing polyester, stop vaping, stop looking at blue light, stop doing drugs, And more than anything, stop watching porn.